A 7-year-old girl was forced by her stepmother to sit by the kitchen trash can, her small body trembling as she picked through rotting scraps of food, forcing them into her mouth through tears. Sobbing, she pleaded, "I can't eat anymore." But in that exact instant, the kitchen door swung open. Her father, a real estate mogul, suddenly appeared. He froze, paralyzed by the sheer horror of the scene unfolding before him. Richard Mason, 42, was a titan in the property development world. 3 years ago, his life had taken a dark turn when Laura, his beloved wife and Sophie's mother, succumbed to a cruel leukemia. Before her last breath, Laura had gripped his hand, her voice weak but firm. "Promise me you'll take care of Sophie. Never let her suffer." Richard had nodded, tears streaming down his face. Those final words haunted him. The loss left him shattered, struggling to run his empire while suddenly becoming both father and mother to his grieving daughter. He thought he'd found an angel in Claire. But as he stared into the kitchen, at his daughter eating garbage, he realized he hadn't found an angel. He had invited in a monster. What city are you watching this video from, and what time is it? By the way, if you're enjoying my videos, I'd be so happy if you could subscribe to my channel and like this video. He'd found Sophie asleep on the sofa too many nights, her small face longing for a hug he wasn't there to give. Richard realized with a pang of guilt that he wasn't strong enough to make up for Laura's absence. That's when Claire, 33, entered his life. He met her at a charity auction. She was soft-spoken, her gestures delicate, her eyes full of what he mistook for compassion. This must be the angel God sent to take care of Sophie, he'd thought. To him, Claire was the perfect substitute mother. That afternoon, the kitchen was silent except for the girls' choked sobs. Sophie, fragile and thin, was curled up on the cold tile floor next to a greasy trash bin. Her face was dirty, her hair tangled. Facing her, Claire stood with her arms crossed, a sneer of contempt on her lips. In Sophie's hand was a piece of hard, moldy bread soaked in grease. Sophie shook her head, her voice trembling. "I can't eat anymore. I feel sick." Claire crouched down, her eyes sharp as knives. "If you're hungry, you eat. Stop being picky. Or would you rather go outside and eat the actual garbage?" She shoved the bread back into Sophie's hand. Sophie forced herself to swallow, a burning sensation rising in her throat. A desperate scream echoed in her mind. "Daddy, where are you?" Claire let out a cold laugh. "Crying won't help you. No one is coming to save you. Remember, I'm your mother now, and you have to obey me." Sophie trembled, trying to take another bite. The rancid taste made her want to vomit, but she didn't dare. Every time she hesitated, Claire snapped. "Eat. Do you want me to call your father and tell him you're throwing a tantrum to defy me?" Claire put her hands on her hips, her voice dropping to a hiss. "Look at you. Filthy. Despicable. The daughter of this house eating trash like it's a feast. You know how embarrassing you are? No wonder your father is never home. Who would want to see this pathetic spectacle?" "Please," Sophie sobbed. "Please don't yell at me anymore." "Mother?" "I am not your mother," Claire laughed, a harsh, icy sound. "I will never see you as my daughter. When I look at you, all I see is the shadow of that wretched Laura. The woman your father will mourn for the rest of his life. Because of you, I will never have his whole heart. I hate you, Sophie. In this house, you are nothing but a burden." Tears streamed down Sophie's cheeks. At that precise instant, the front door opened. The sound of dress shoes echoed on the tile floor. Richard was home. A meeting had been suddenly canceled. The moment he entered the kitchen, he froze. There was Sophie, his little girl, on the floor by the trash. And there was Claire, the woman he'd trusted. "What is this, Claire?" Richard's voice was hoarse with shock. Claire flinched for a fraction of a second, but quickly recovered. She ran to her husband, grabbing his arm as her eyes filled with tears. "Richard, I don't know. I just walked into the kitchen and saw her sitting here. She keeps digging trash out to play with, and then just sits there crying. I'm so worried. Maybe the poor thing has some kind of psychological problem." Richard's heart hammered in his chest. He turned to Sophie. The girl just sat there, her big eyes full of tears, trembling, unable to speak. Sophie wanted to scream, "She made me eat it," but her voice was trapped. Richard knelt. "Sophie, what are you doing here? Tell Daddy what happened." Sophie looked at her father, her lips trembling, but no words came out. Claire immediately intervened, her tone dripping with false compassion. "You see? She won't talk. I'm just so scared, Richard. I only want to help her. Richard stood up, his hands shaking. Laura's words echoed in his mind. Never let her suffer. But so did Claire's repeated whispers from the past few months. Richard, Sophie is showing strange behaviors. I'm worried she's unstable. She needs treatment. His gaze darkened. He turned, gripping Claire's shoulders. If you are lying to me, Claire, if this is some kind of act, I will file for divorce immediately. Claire froze, then wept even harder, leaning against his shoulder. But from the corner of her eye, a glint of satisfaction flickered. She knew he still doubted. Richard pulled away. He looked at Sophie, who was staring at him with desperate hope. But in her father's eyes, she saw only a shadow of doubt. Her heart shattered. She sat still, tears rolling down her face, but she no longer sobbed. Inside, she whispered, "If even Daddy doesn't believe me, who will?" The next evening, dinner was silent. Sophie sat in a corner, small and quiet. Richard sat at the head of the table, trying to maintain harmony. Claire, playing the role of the devoted young wife, placed a piece of fish on Sophie's plate. "Eat, honey. You're so thin. You worry me." Sophie stared at the fish, then lowered her head. "I'm not hungry." Richard put down his fork. "Come on, Sophie, just a little. You're worrying us." The girl's shoulders trembled. Claire quickly shot her a sharp look, then turned to her husband. "You see, Richard? She's so stubborn. I'm afraid she might have psychological problems." Those words froze Richard. Psychological problems. He'd heard Claire mention it before, but now he remembered the days after Laura died. How Sophie had screamed, calling for her mother. That wound had never healed. Just then, a warm voice spoke from behind. "Honey, have some soup. Don't worry your father." It was Maria, the housekeeper, who had been with the family for over 10 years. In Sophie's eyes, Maria was one of the few sources of comfort left. Maria placed a steaming bowl of chicken soup in front of Sophie. She bent down and whispered, "Eat, dear. Just one spoonful. You need strength." Sophie shook her head, her lips trembling. Her voice was so weak only Maria could hear. I'm scared." Maria froze. She looked into the girl's eyes and saw raw panic. Before she could ask more, Claire spoke. "See, she never listens. I think we should take her to see a doctor soon." That night, Sophie returned to her room. She opened her desk drawer and took out a small blue notebook, the diary she'd started when Claire moved in. Her hand shook as she scribbled, "Tonight, stepmother made me eat garbage. I wanted to tell Daddy, but I was scared. I think he believes her, not me. It hurts." She stopped, tears falling on the page. She took a deep breath and continued, "I will save all the proof. One day, Daddy will see the truth." She quickly closed the book and hid it under her pillow. The next morning, Richard was walking past Sophie's room when he heard a faint rustle. He pushed the door open. Sophie gasped, quickly shoving the notebook back under her pillow. Her face went pale. Richard froze, his eyes fixed on what she'd done. He could feel her hiding something. "Sophie," he said, his voice slow and deep. "Are you hiding something from me?" Sophie's eyes widened. Her whole body trembled. The office phone rang insistently, forcing him to drop the question. Go get breakfast, honey. I have to take this call." The door closed. Sophie sat frozen, clinging to her pillow. At school, Ms. Evans, her homeroom teacher, noticed the change. Sophie was pale with dark circles under her eyes. During recess, Ms. Evans knelt to look her in the eye. "Sophie, why are you so pale? And what happened to your hand?" Startled, Sophie hid her arm, but not before the teacher saw the faint bruises. I just fell," Sophie stammered. Ms. Evans sighed. "If something is wrong, Sophie, you can tell me. I will listen." Sophie bit her lip, tears welling up, but she said nothing. Claire's threat echoed in her mind. "If you open your mouth, I'll make your father believe you're crazy." That afternoon, Claire started a new game. She waited until Richard was working late, then called Sophie to the backyard. The air was cold. Claire grabbed Sophie's shoulders and pushed her onto the porch. "Stay there. Don't come in until I say so." Sophie shivered violently. "Please, let me in. I'm freezing." Claire just smiled and pulled out her phone. Click, click, click. She took photos of Sophie, trembling, lips pale, eyes wet with tears. "Perfect," Claire sneered. "If you ever dare say anything, I'll show these to your father. He'll think you like hurting yourself. Then he'll hand you right over to the doctors." The next morning, Claire approached Richard, her face a mask of worry. "Richard, you have to see this. I don't know what to do anymore." He took the phone. On the screen, Sophie was hunched over in the cold night. "Why was she out there?" he demanded. Claire's eyes filled with fake tears. "I found her standing there when I went to check on her. I don't know why she does this to herself. Richard, I'm really worried. I think Sophie has a problem." Richard fell silent, his mind in a tailspin. The photo, combined with her memory loss about the trash incident, deepened his confusion. That evening, he confronted his daughter. "Sophie, I need the truth. Why were you outside last night?" Sophie's face filled with panic. I wasn't. I didn't do it. But I saw the picture, Sophie. I need you to be honest. I swear I didn't," she cried. "Daddy, you have to believe me." Claire entered, sitting gracefully beside Richard. "You see? She's denying it again. I love Sophie, but she clearly can't control herself. We need a doctor, Richard. The longer we wait, the more dangerous this gets." Richard looked at his daughter, trembling and pleading. He felt like he was being torn in two. "Daddy, I didn't do it. I don't want to go anywhere." "I know you love her," Claire whispered, "but we have to face the truth. We need to help her." Richard sighed, his voice heavy. "Maybe you're right. I'll call the doctor tomorrow." Claire lowered her gaze, hiding a triumphant smile. Sophie froze. She stared at her father, her small hands shaking. "Daddy, why won't you believe me?" A few nights later was the annual charity gala for the city's elite. Richard entered with Claire on his arm, holding Sophie's hand. He tried to look confident, greeting partners, though he was deeply unsettled. As Richard spoke with an older businessman, Sophie tried to push through the crowd to get to him. Claire subtly stuck out her foot, giving the girl a small push. Sophie tripped and fell hard onto the marble floor. The sharp crack made the crowd gasp. Murmurs spread instantly. What happened? Is she hurt? In that moment, a woman of about 38 stepped out of the crowd. She wore an elegant dress, a pearl necklace gleaming. It was Dr. Patricia Hughes, a friend of Claire's. She ran a private clinic, often working hand in hand with women like Claire. Dr. Hughes knelt to lift Sophie. "Oh, this isn't the first time. I've heard a lot about this child. Sophie has a tendency to self-harm. I even have her files." "Files?" Richard was stunned. "What do you mean?" Patricia opened her purse and handed him a neat stack of papers. "I'm a psychologist. Claire asked me to observe Sophie from a distance, and I took notes. Here is the evidence. Standing outside for hours, refusing to eat, self-injury. It all points to a serious psychological risk." Richard scanned the pages. His heart sank. The neat typing, every line filled with clinical details, left him reeling. Claire immediately clung to his arm, her voice breaking. "You see it now, don't you? I'm so scared she'll hurt herself one day." All eyes in the ballroom turned to Richard. "Poor girl," someone whispered. Maybe he really should get her treatment. The pressure was immense. His reputation, his partners, and the heavy weight of fatherhood crushed him. Sophie staggered to her feet and threw herself against her father's legs, breaking down. "I'm not crazy, Daddy. I'm just scared of her. Please believe me." Richard looked down at his daughter's tear-filled eyes. That desperate plea cut through him. He wanted to scream that he protected her. But Claire was sobbing on one side, and the expert, Dr. Hughes, stood firmly on the other, holding the evidence. "Sir," Dr. Hughes said professionally. "With these symptoms, Sophie must be admitted for observation immediately. The danger is very real." A staff member quickly placed a pen and the papers on a nearby table. "Mr. Mason, if it's necessary, please sign. We can handle the arrangements." Richard looked at the document. The words psychiatric admission request. Sophie Mason stared back at him. His hand trembled. "Daddy, don't sign it." Sophie clung to him. "I'm not crazy. I promise." Richard squeezed his eyes shut. Laura's voice. "Never let her suffer." The murmurs. "He should do it. It's too dangerous." He gripped the pen. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He lowered the pen and with a heavy stroke signed his name. "Daddy, no," Sophie screamed, her voice echoing across the silent ballroom. Richard dropped the pen and collapsed into his chair, burying his face in his hands. He felt as if he had just signed away the most precious thing in his life. Sophie fell to the floor sobbing. Her eyes, once bright, went vacant. Her trust in her father had shattered, leaving an empty void. The house was silent when they returned from the gala. The key turning in the lock sounded like a prison door slamming shut. Sophie went straight upstairs, not even looking at her father. Richard reached out a hand, then let it drop, his eyes hollow. Claire gently guided him to the living room, her control absolute. Sophie entered her room and fell onto the bed, her small shoulders shaking. She pulled out her diary, her pencil trembling as she wrote, "If I disappear tomorrow, I hope someone finds the truth. I'm not crazy. I just want to be loved. But nobody believes me, not even Daddy." She closed the book, clutching it to her chest. Then she knelt, reached deep into a drawer, and pulled out an old digital camera Richard had bought her years ago. She had tried using it a few times to secretly record what was happening. Tonight she knew she had to capture the proof. She knelt and placed the small device under her bed, the lens pointed toward the door and her desk. "I'll leave proof," she whispered to herself. "If I disappear, someone will know." Downstairs, Richard poured another glass of whiskey. He'd lost count. All he could see was the desperate, betrayed look in Sophie's eyes. The scream, "Daddy, don't sign!" echoed in his head. He put his head on the desk and whispered Laura's name. "I promised I'd protect her, Laura, but today, she looked at me like I was a stranger. Did I do the right thing? Or am I the one pushing her into the abyss?" With Richard now convinced Sophie was unstable, Claire grew bolder. While she was sweet to Richard, her malice toward Sophie intensified when he wasn't home. One afternoon, while forcing Sophie to scrub the kitchen floor, Claire erupted. "Who do you think you are?" she hissed, kicking the bucket. "You're just Laura's shadow. A few more proofs and I'll have your father convinced you're completely insane. Then you'll disappear from this house, and I will finally have everything." Sophie sobbed, trying to clean faster just to escape Claire's sharp gaze. In her heart, the small camera under her bed was her only lifeline. She prayed it had recorded those cruel words. 3 days later, Maria found it. She had gone up to Sophie's room to change the sheets while the girl was at school. As Maria bent to pick up a teddy bear that had fallen, she saw it, a small, blinking red light from under the bed. Her heart pounded. Gently pulling the small box out, she found the camera. Her hands trembled as she pressed the play button. The screen lit up. The image was blurry, angled up from the floor, but the sound was crystal clear. It was Claire's voice, sharp and venomous. "You are nothing but trash. I'll make everyone believe you have problems. I swear, once Richard signs the final papers, you will disappear." Maria froze, the blood draining from her face. She heard Sophie's muffled voice on the video. "I don't want to go anywhere. I just want to be with Daddy." Maria's hands shook. Tears filled her eyes. She had suspected, but now she had proof. Claire hadn't just insulted the girl. She had confessed her entire plan. Maria sat on the bed, clutching the camera. "This child," she whispered. "She has endured this all alone. Sophie, I promise, I will not let your voice be lost." That evening, Richard sat in his study, the desk littered with newspapers. The headlines were cruel. "Real estate mogul neglects mentally ill daughter." He crumpled one and threw it across the room, his mind a dark labyrinth. The door opened. Maria entered, her face tense, her hands holding a small USB drive. She placed it firmly on the desk. "Mr. Mason, I cannot stay silent any longer. On this drive is a video. It is the truth Sophie has been trying to tell you." Richard looked up, a faint spark in his exhausted eyes. He took the drive. "Are you sure, Maria?" Maria nodded, tears streaming. "I've listened to it. There is no mistake. Sir, you need to find a strong lawyer. If you don't, that woman will brand Sophie for life." The next morning, Richard was in the office of Lydia Price, a lawyer known for her relentless pursuit of justice. Lydia accepted the USB, her sharp gaze fixed on Richard. "I will review this thoroughly. If it's what you say, we can use it. But remember, your wife and her team will fight back dirty. Are you prepared for that?" Richard nodded, his voice firm. "I've already failed. Now all I want is to save my daughter." That afternoon, Richard received an unexpected call. David, his longtime chauffeur, asked for a meeting. He sat across from Richard, his face etched with regret. "Mr. Mason, I have something to confess. I saw Mrs. Mason push Sophie many times, force her to do heavy chores. I knew it, but I didn't speak up. I was afraid of losing my job." Richard gripped the armrest of his chair. "You knew she was being abused and you said nothing?" David broke down. "I know I was a coward, but please give me a chance to make it right. I'm willing to testify. I can't live with this guilt anymore." Meanwhile, at the school, Ms. Evans was writing a multi-page report. She documented every time Sophie came to class with bruises, every time the girl flinched when asked a question, every time she sat alone, crying. In her report, Ms. Evans stated, "I do not believe Sophie suffers from a mental illness. I believe she is suffering from severe emotional and physical abuse. I urge the court to review this entire case." The day of the final hearing, the atmosphere was electric. The courtroom was packed. Reporters lined every wall. Claire sat serenely, her appearance impeccable. Mr. Thorne, her lawyer, looked relaxed. Richard entered, holding Sophie's hand, with Maria and Lydia Price by his side. His steps were firm. Lydia Price stood, holding the USB drive high. "Your Honor, I would like to present critical new evidence. This is a video recorded inside Mr. Mason's own home. It will reveal the true face of Mrs. Claire Mason." The judge nodded. The technician connected the drive to the large courtroom screens. Claire's face appeared, twisted in rage. Her voice echoed, every word a venomous hiss. "You are nothing but trash. You deserve to eat garbage. I made everyone believe you were crazy. Richard already signed the papers, and soon you will disappear from this house forever." The courtroom fell into a stunned silence. Claire turned ghostly pale. She leapt to her feet, her voice a shrill scream. "That's a fake. It's a setup. The girl and someone else. They created this scene to frame me." "I never said that." Her shriek echoed, but it convinced no one. Sophie, sitting between Richard and Maria, broke into tears. "I didn't trap anyone," she whispered, her voice cracking. I just want to live like other kids. I just want to be with my daddy." Mr. Thorne stood, trying to regain control. "Your Honor, that video could easily have been edited. We object." Lydia Price was ready. "Your Honor, we had a forensic expert verify the file. It is completely original, with no edits. Furthermore, I asked the court to review the medical records Mr. Thorne presented at the previous hearing." 2 files appeared on the screen. On the left, Lydia announced, is the diagnosis from Dr. Hughes. On the right, the authentic hospital archive. As you can see, the official seal is crudely forged. The doctor's signature is also a fake. Mr. Thorne knowingly used fraudulent documents to accuse a 7-year-old child. The courtroom erupted. The judge hammered his gavel. "Mr. Thorne, how do you explain this?" Thorne stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. I merely relied on the documents provided by my client." "You are an officer of the court, sir," Lydia countered. "It is your duty to verify." Dr. Patricia Hughes was called to the stand. She was pale, her hands shaking. Under pressure, she finally broke. "I did it," she cried. "I did it at Claire's request. I signed those fake medical reports for money. I knew it was wrong, but I was tempted." Claire spun around, her face a mask of fury. "You traitor! You set me up." But no one was listening. Richard Mason slowly stood up. He walked to Sophie, his face wet with tears but his eyes burning with resolve. In front of the judge, the press, and everyone present, he opened his arms and pulled his daughter into his embrace. His voice, choked but resolute, filled the room. "Enough. This is my daughter, and I was a fool to let her suffer alone. Sophie is not crazy. She has never had a problem. She just needs love. I swear before this court, I will never, ever let anyone harm her again." Sophie wept into her father's arms, her small hands gripping his shirt. Richard kissed her hair. "I'm sorry, Sophie. From now on, I will believe you." The judge slammed his gavel 3 times, his voice booming over the silent room. "This hearing is concluded. This court finds Mrs. Claire Mason guilty of child abuse, conspiracy to defraud, and perjury. Mr. Thorne, you are disbarred, and your license to practice law is revoked. Dr. Hughes, you are found guilty of medical fraud and perjury." The gavel crashed down like a final, punctuating strike, ending the chain of lies. Reporters scrambled. Headlines already flying. Mogul's wife convicted. Daughter vindicated. Sophie cried out, running into Richard's arms. "Daddy," she sobbed. "You believed me this time." Richard held her so tightly it almost hurt, tears streaming down his own face. "I am so sorry I let you suffer for so long," he whispered. "From now on, I will never let you down again. I promise." The next morning, the sunlight felt different. Richard didn't go to the office. He called an emergency board meeting and announced he was handing over most day-to-day operations to his vice president. "I need time for my family," was his only explanation. That afternoon, he took Sophie to the park. In his hands, he held a young sapling. "What's that, Daddy?" Sophie asked. "We're going to plant this tree," Richard said, his voice warm. "We'll plant it for your mother. It will grow with you, strong and steady." Sophie was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled and nodded. Together, they dug the hole, placing the young tree in the earth. Sophie's small hands were stained with soil, but her face glowed with a joy Richard hadn't seen in years. When they finished, she threw her arms around her father's legs. "Daddy, you're all I have." Richard hugged her back, his eyes blurring. "My daughter," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "We finally found each other again." The image of Sophie huddled by the trash can, whispering, "I can't eat anymore," is impossible to forget. Behind those tears was a stolen childhood, tormented by the very person who should have protected her. But in that darkest moment, the truth was revealed. Her father, Richard, finally realized his daughter was the only treasure he ever needed to protect, not the false, sweet words of the woman hiding behind an angel's mask. The message of this story is clear. The wicked will eventually be punished, and the good will receive the justice and love they deserve. Claire, Thorne, and Hughes all paid the price. And that little girl, after so much suffering, found her father's embrace again. She found her true home. Stories like this always remind us that while life can be brutal, love and truth can never be buried forever. What do you think of this story? If you were Sophie, would you have had the courage to gather the proof? If you were Richard, would you dare to face the truth and make things right? Please share your thoughts. Thank you for staying with me until the end.